Hi, this is Deborah Waller, Deborah Young Waller, and I'm going to read another tidbit of the book, The Traveling Preacher's Wife. And this is going to be taken from chapter 4. While I was still living at home at the age of 25, I first met Reverend Larry Young, a traveling preacher. I was single and still living at home when my cousin Sandy's husband brought him to the house to introduce him to me. I heard the knock on the door while my mom was at the store. When I opened the patio door, there, standing beside Sandy's husband, was Larry Young, this handsome and charming 30-year-old man. My heart skipped a beat, and it felt like I was going to hyperventilate. The shy, young 25-year-old was face to face with a man who appeared to be Prince Charming. I felt something in my heart for the first time in my life. At the time, I didn't figure it all out yet. All I could say is, with a sheepish smile, was, "Hi." Larry smiled and responded back, "Hi." Then my cousin's husband looked at both of us and said, "Well, I guess we better get going now and see you later." After they walked away, I closed the patio door. "Wowee," I thought out loud. Later that day, I told my parents what had happened, and they spoke up. "You don't need to be getting involved with a traveling preacher." My heart sank at that moment with such a negative response. I also felt that if God wanted me with someone like that, He would work everything out according to His timing. Earlier that week, my aunt had called and told me, "Deb, you need to meet this good-looking young preacher who is celebrating his 30th birthday today. He's holding revival at our church. You need to meet him." I spoke up with much gratitude and said, "Thank you for thinking of me, but I don't think I can go." I knew I was living under my parents' house while working a part-time job. I felt they probably wouldn't have approved. I really didn't know this man, even though I did trust my aunt and uncle. Timing, I felt, was everything. With everything, there is a season and a time for every purpose. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. After that first-time encounter, Larry soon closed the revival at the Rose of Sharon Full Gospel Temple and left to go to another revival in a different state. He was a full-time evangelist who had never been married and committed his whole life to the gospel of Jesus Christ. You know, in Ecclesiastes that I talked about, chapter 3, verse 1, for everything there's a season and a time for every purpose. And sometimes we want to rush something because we want it so bad. But we have to understand that in the journey, he said, a good man's footsteps are ordered of the Lord. And when God has timing for us, if we rush the timing and we're not ready for what God has called us to do, for the purpose and destiny, we could really set ourselves back. We could really mess up the plan that God has for us. It's like Joseph in the Bible, with the one with the coat of many colors, and he had this dream, and in this dream, to kind of put it in a nutshell, he had destiny and he had purpose, but the things that coincide like pieces of a puzzle prepared him for that. And it didn't happen all at once. He had this dream. He shared it with his brothers. He had a lot of himself. They had to purge out by the Holy Spirit. God had to set up events and circumstances to where it not only prepared him and sharpened his trade and what God had chosen to do, but it had to prepare him to be able to have a humble spirit. And he had kind of like an attitude a little bit, like, well, you guys are going to be bound before me one day. It ticked his brothers off. But through the things that we go through, it prepares us for our future. If we're faithful over the least, God's going to make us ruler over much. We have to go through the journey. You have an apprentice that will have to learn the trade, have to go through training, and then one day, through time and gaining experience, then they become a journeyman. And what God had to do in my life I was raised in a gospel group, the Smith Family Gospel Singers, but I had to go through the journey to be the traveling preacher's wife, because all the things that God, he said, equips the saints, and he had to equip me for service. Much is given, much is required. The more people that you are able to influence, if you're not ready for the journey and for the purpose and the destiny, that's how many people you can hurt. So God had to take me through a series of events. And the Traveling Preacher's Wife talks about the journey of a ministry, how God would prepare you for the ministry, to use you for what the call is in your life. He'll take your talents, he'll take everything that he allows in your life, the test in our lives, and the things that are hard and the hardships, like Joseph having to go to prison because he wouldn't bow down to sin in the palace, to where the leader's wife was seducing him. He was put in prison for quite a while. But in that prison, it not only humbled him, but it trained him to be a leader. And whenever God has a calling on your life, don't despise small beginnings. We have to be patient. Faith through patience, we inherit the promises of God. And with my journey as a traveling preacher's wife, I had to be trained for it. And I walked the journey. And then one day, God brought that together, that plan together like pieces of a puzzle. Until next time, this is your Tidbit, the Traveling Preacher's Wife, Debra Young Waller. God bless.